Welcome everyone, Christine here on Serious Gaming to talk about World of Warcraft Classic and the biggest mistake that Blizzard made. A decision that haunts us to this day and something that they should absolutely avoid when it comes to the Burning Crusade and beyond, because I imagine there will be a beyond. I think there would be plenty of people interested in playing Wrath of the Lich King, Cataclysm, and so on. We'll have to wait and see on that though. The decision that they made is either the cause of many of the problems plaguing Classic right now, or significantly contributed to those issues. Layering, the inability to farm in the open world, especially at certain times, given the incredible competition that you'll face, in no small part thanks to the bots, the Black Lotus Mafia, and the botting and gold selling pandemic that is plaguing the game, among others. I am, of course, talking here about Blizzard's decision to launch Classic with way too damn few servers, in spite of the fact that it was clear as day that the servers they did have would never be able to handle the enormous influx of players they would have at launch, with Blizzard only adding new servers at the last minute just before the launch of Classic, which did help to a certain degree, or after launch, which made those servers unlikely to become viable. Since who wants to go on a dead server when you are already playing with your friends and or your guild on a thriving one, despite all the issues that you would face? Some could blame the player base for this, but frankly, in this respect, the decision to release a limited number of servers lay with Blizzard, not with the subscribers, and Blizzard chose very, very poorly. As a result of a lack of plentiful servers before the game's launch, even with the large number of layers available on each server, open world leveling became an absolute nightmare, forcing people to turn to dungeon leveling, which is, as you can imagine, a great deal of fun. I'm sure many of us were overjoyed having to do Scarlet Monastery, Zul'Farrak, BRD over and over and over again, since other options just really weren't workable with the large number of people that were playing on each server and with the massive problems that existed at launch. Certainly, exploits and bugs contributed to the situation, such as the ability to level while in a raid and doing instances meant for 5 people with 10 people, like Zul'Farrak as an example, or the Lyceum experience bug, among other things. But it didn't help the situation that trying to level in the open world, especially in the early zones, was an absolute nightmare. That's assuming you could even log into the game. The queues were some of the most incredible that I've ever seen playing this game in all the years that I've played WoW, or any other game for that matter. Servers with over 10,000, if not 20 or 30,000 people, and queues depending, of course, on the server and time of day. And this situation lasted for weeks, if not months, dependent on where you are playing, because Blizzard was trying to eliminate the layering, so they limited the number of people who could log on a server at any given time to reduce the population, limit the layering. That was their intent. Well, they failed. Then there's the gold farming aspect. Forcing so many people together on so few servers did no small amount of damage for the economy of every server, given the lack of available materials for consumables, or having too many people fighting for too few rare epic BOEs on the auction house. This became especially a problem with the limited number of Black Lotuses, a problem that Blizzard did actually take action to resolve, but it wasn't just restricted to flasks. Wonder why botting and gold selling are such a problem? Look no further than this decision. Certainly, Classic was always going to be lucrative for these kind of people, given the inherent difficulty of farming gold and large number of consumables required for raiding, but the degree to which this has gotten out of control is astounding, even for an MMO, for any MMO. Blizzard's perspective, as best as I can tell, was that there would be a very large number of so-called tourists interested in playing the game, perhaps, or checking out for a period of time, that would then quit, since Classic isn't exactly the most polished experience in the world. And let's be frank, it's an outdated, broken mess in many significant ways that anyone who's honest about it would recognize has many severe issues, something expected for a game that's well over a decade and a half old. Blizzard's thinking was that it made more sense to have fewer servers and instead rely on layering initially before removing those layers. In this respect, they failed spectacularly and even accepted defeat on their overall design on certain servers. Helped along by the coronavirus, certainly, but it's not just that. The layering decision, the decision that they made with layering, okay, let's have layering launch, remove it slowly but steadily, that clearly failed. The queues were abysmal and they lasted for such a long period of time that they made playing on some of the highly populated servers an absolute nightmare for way too long, until Blizzard just admitted defeat, and with all the problems that caused. Blizzard wasn't entirely wrong in their thinking on this. There are many people, millions quite likely, that did check out Classic for a limited period of time and then quit, either dissatisfied with the game or disliking the piss poor launch, or both is unclear. But what is clear without a doubt is that the number of people that did decide to keep playing was far greater than anticipated by, frankly, anyone except the people who had played Classic on private servers, who had played Vanilla on private servers, and who understood that, sure, it's old, but it's still very, very good. But perhaps Blizzard was listening instead to the people in the gaming press or people on forums and Twitter and social media in general who were saying things like, oh, 40-man raiding is so difficult because it's very hard to organize. I'm quite serious on this. There were people for years arguing this. It's like, oh, it's too difficult to organize a 40-man raid. This is amusing in retrospect, seeing as there are many guilds right now that don't just have one 40-man raid, they have two free 40-man raids. They have a pug or multiple pugs, alt pugs, running at the same time. So the idea, oh, it's difficult to organize a 40-man raiding team, it is laughable for anyone who has done it really in Classic, or anyone who's even done it on private servers. Look, I'm not saying leading a 40-man raid is easy, right? You lose a lot of time, you spend a lot of time, but when has that ever been different? If you want to lead a successful guild, if you want to lead a successful raid, it does take a lot of time and effort and energy for anyone that's in a leadership position. It's been the case in World of Warcraft since Vanilla and beyond. It doesn't really matter what kind of raid size you're talking about. I guess for 10-man, it probably was different if you could rely on everyone in that particular team and you had the tight-knit group of people. But that's really the exception. For 20-man, for 25-man, for 40-man, it's always been an absolute nightmare. And it's, you know, some raid leaders that I've talked to, and I've been a raid leader, I've been a guild leader myself, and I would compare it really to a full-time job, and so have other people that I've talked to. But hey, what do I know, right? Let's bow down to the wisdom of people on social media, or that people would quickly come to despise Classic because it's a really shit game. Well, turns out, not so much. Many of us that kept playing just don't give a damn about these kind of things. I mean, really, the 40-man raiding organization issue is something that doesn't affect individual players. It affects the leadership, it doesn't affect individuals. And we don't care about it or other issues, because Classic is just that great of an experience in other ways, especially at creating a large online community and a good dynamic social experience. One of the key strengths of any good MMO, something that I feel Blizzard has completely and truly ignored over the years, instead embracing a very casual solo approach to very large sections of the game on retail. It doesn't matter that some sections of the game, like Mythic Raiding, Mythic Dungeons, require you to actually play in a group of people that you communicate on that, if the vast majority of the game doesn't require that. And sure, much of the game in Classic can be done without really interacting with other people. You can certainly get to 60 without really bothering to interact with other people, but it is rewarded to interact with other people. It gives you tangible benefits. It's easier to do a lot of quests with multiple people. It's easier to obviously get the dungeon group together if you know the people that you're playing with, all those kind of things. So Classic rewards interaction between players. Retail really doesn't in a large part of the game. For a lot of people, having a game that you can come home from work day after day, that's constantly being played by people that you know, in a guild in particular, many of them that you may have only met online, is a significant draw. It's what has made WoW successful for all these years, and clearly the player base of Classic has far surpassed Blizzard's expectations. Not very surprising for a company where one of the key people infamously said, "You think you do, but you don't." So we ended up with unbearable queues, horrible server economies, a broken leveling experience, bots, and gold sellers making things worse, and yet still the number of active World of Warcraft subscribers more than doubled thanks to Classic in large part. Maybe this should be considered a sign of how great Classic is despite all of its flaws, and they are real, or perhaps it's a monument to the failure of retail WoW. Take your pick. But either way, I think it would be best to avoid all of these issues or do as much as possible to reduce them in the future. So what can Blizzard do? Well, Blizzard, for the Burning Crusade and beyond, should release new servers in significantly more in number than we currently have right now. Because beyond the fact you may very well have a lot more players interested in the Burning Crusade than Classic for any number of reasons, many servers right now are simply way too overpopulated. The point, you could cut the population on many of them in half to a third or even a quarter in some very extreme examples and still have very healthy communities in general, very healthy servers in general. I think having more servers at launch would be far more reasonable than relying as heavily on layering as Blizzard did for Classic. Certainly to some degree, improved spawn rates and layering can help, but those should only be used to a limited and temporary degree on the highly populated servers only, and not be the default stance for every server at launch as it was for Classic, because yes, we did have improved spawn rates for certain things in the early game areas, and we did have a lot of layers. If Blizzard does this, if they create more servers, even if some of them fail, like I wouldn't guarantee that some of them wouldn't fail, but even if some of them do fail, it would be a lot better for the vast majority of them. It would create better and healthier server communities as far as I see it. Christine here on Serious Gaming, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. And if you do like my content, consider supporting me via PayPal, Patreon, or through YouTube channel membership.